Everything that happens is neutral until you decide to label it. And if you want to label yourself as a victim right now, no one's going to argue with you. When you're in pain, sometimes you're just not ready to hear some things. We get to decide how we want to feel what we're going to feel and whether or not we want to shoot a second arrow at ourselves and make the pain worse. You can even have some neutrality with the emotion of worry. We don't have to label it as bad. It's just worry. And then what we do with it, that is up to us to determine how to best move forward. Meditation and mindfulness can also expand your awareness so you can see more perspective, so you can choose better labels.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flow Over Fear. I am really glad you're here today because you're in for a real treat with this guest. His name is Michael O'Brien, and he has an incredibly inspiring story. I mean, I was blown away by this conversation. In 2001, Michael was seemingly, from all outside appearances, living the dream. He had a wonderful family. He was on the success train north to the C-suite of executive leadership. And he just seemed to be, from all outside appearances, living just this wonderful, successful life. But he was chasing this happiness that he could never quite grasp from the inside. And that was causing him a lot of stress and anxiety internally. In 2001, his life transformed in an instant when he experienced a horrific accident that nearly killed him. And in the recovery process from that accident, he obviously went through some very dark times. But in the end, he found a mindfulness practice that helped to transform his life for the better and find a new perspective on life, where he no longer chased happiness, but now he practices that mindfulness and he has found greater success, greater joy, not just business, but in athletic pursuits as well. He got back on the bike to the point where he biked across the United States, and success in business actually brought him to running a team of over 1,000 people with a $4 billion budget. And so he's got an incredibly inspiring story. And today he wants to help people to achieve that same inner peace through mindfulness. Today he's a qualified meditation teacher. He's an executive coach, and he's an endurance athlete. And he's also the creator of the Pause, Breathe, Reflect meditation and gratitude app, an app that helps teach people how to adopt these simple mindfulness practices. And he loves helping people to accomplish hard things through mindfulness. And that horrific accident, that near-death cycling accident that he was in, he calls that his last bad day. Only good days from here. So Michael joins me now. Please enjoy this episode. Well, hey, everybody. I do have Michael O'Brien with me. I am excited to have him here because he has an amazing story. And probably more importantly, he has a great dad joke to share with us. So we're going to jump right into that. Michael, welcome to the show, first of all. And can you, share the dad joke with us?
This is awesome, Adam. I love it. So thanks for having me on. And we're going to get right into the meat of the conversation.
Yes.
Really good dad joke. So this might come out in our conversation, but I'm a father of 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. Taylor Swift fans. We're a Swiftie household. So here's my dad joke. Taylor Swift inspired. Why didn't the vampire bite Taylor Swift?
Oh, okay. I can only think of 1,984 reasons, but why?
Because she has bad blood, which is one of her songs. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Bad blood,
Well done.
So that's, the Taylor Swiftie fans out there will get that joke. And now people are slapping their knee and thinking, all right, this is either going to be a really good conversation or look, we're going to turn down the volume and switch the station,
Well, that's the beauty of dad jokes, though, is for as bad as they often are, and they should be bad. You're not doing your job unless they're bad.
Yes, they got to be bad.
They make connections. I think they help connect us. So I think that's what you've just done with the audience, and I'm really glad you're here because this is a really, really inspiring story that you've come from, and I think a lot of people, myself included, can relate to this. That starting off in this high-powered position or building your way up to become a career, executive high, in the C-suite, and then having your life turned around by a near-death experience. And so kind of getting to the background, can you share a little bit about your story, about how you made it into the business world and became that executive?
Yeah, I would love to. So I grew up in Rochester, New York, home of Kodak and home of Wegmans, a really awesome supermarket. For those that know it, you know it. Like when you know, you know. So a great place to shop. Went to school in Virginia, and to be honest, like growing up, like sports was my jam, and so I was never like the best player on the team, but I actually love practicing more than the competing. I just love to I love to play. And sports was my outlet. It was also a way to connect with my dad. And so I did it all. Like the seasons changed and my sport changed. So, nowadays with kids, they pick a sport and they specialize in the sport and they do it 24/7, 365. Not where I grew up. We would just, when it was football season, we played football. When it was basketball, baseball, those big sports. And I fell in love with cycling in the 80s. So this was a departure from the big popular sports. I think my dad almost had a stroke when he found me shaving my legs for the first time. He was like, here I was like 16. He walks into the bathroom and I'm shaving my legs. And he's like, what the, some salty language. And I'm like, all the cyclists do this, Dad. And so,
yeah, you haven't lived before you've shaved your legs, by the way. I mean, it is like so freeing.
So Adam, like a little bit of a side, the moment you shave your legs and you slip into your seats at bed at night, like that feeling is such a good feeling. Like you just slide right into your bed. It's really awesome. For those that don't get it, try it out. It's actually quite cool. But I fell in love with cycling, and that was sort of my passion through late high school and college. And then I had an affair with running. So I did some marathons. I did Boston. But I really didn't necessarily have a game plan. I was like, okay, you work hard in college, you get a gig, you work hard at that gig, you move up the corporate ladder, you meet someone, you start a family. That's how I thought life was. That was sort of my orientation growing up. And I was doing fairly well. Like I met my wife in Washington, D.C. We had our first daughter there. I had a pretty good gig. And then they moved me to the corporate office in beautiful New Jersey. Like, who doesn't want to live in New Jersey? And we're like, yes. And I had a pretty important job, sort of a big fish in a small pond. It would have looked really impressive on LinkedIn if LinkedIn was a thing back then. And then I had like that trip out to New Mexico. It was a corporate offsite meeting. And I brought my bike out because by this time we had our second daughter. So our girls were 3.5 years old and 7 months old. They had yet to find Taylor Swift.
Yes.
And
she was what, probably like 12 at the time? Something
12
like that.
At the time, yeah, yet to be famous.
Right.
And I brought my bike out there to cross New Mexico off the states I've cycled in. And I was training for a race. And that morning I got hit by a Ford Explorer head on. It was going 40 miles an hour. My trauma team has no idea how I survived based on my injuries. They told my wife, had I been 10 years older or not healthy, I would have died before I got to the hospital. We were north of Albuquerque, so I needed to be helicoptered in to the only trauma one center in the state. First surgery took about 12, 13 hours. I needed like 34 units of blood product to save my life. What happened when the left femur shattered, because I broke both of my legs in multiple places, but the left femur really took the brunt of the impact. It lacerated the femoral artery of my leg. So I was literally like almost bleeding out in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. It was a brand new property. Now, if you go there, there's a casino and the golf club has matured, or the golf course has matured and all that stuff like that. So we went out there the very first year and the guy was just driving to work and he was cutting the apex of a turn and I was at the apex and here we are. And, I just remember getting on the helicopter and I made a promise to whomever was listening. I was like, if I live, I promise I'll do life better. I was like, I'll stop chasing my happiness. Because the early part of my career, I was like, I'll be happy when I like get the stuff, like get the title, get the car. Like when we moved from Washington, D.C. to New Jersey, I moved up with a Ford Taurus. That was my car, just to give an example. And it seemed like everyone in our town had fancy cars, like Beamers and Audis. And I was like, oh man, like I thought we were doing pretty well in DC, and now we're like not doing so well comparatively. So, and I was like, well, once I get that, I'll be happy. And I did buy the car, but you know, after 3 days, the new car smell disappears. And you're like, you go back to chasing, you get back on this hedonic treadmill, the hamster wheel, however you want to look at it. And that was how I was living my life. And I'll just say this as a human, but also as a guy growing up, I was never really taught how to process emotions. So when I was feeling stressed, because I felt stressed because we were a one income family at that point in time, we made this move up to New Jersey. I was like, okay, a big high profile job. I just would pack as I would call them, my rocks of stress, of doubt, of worry, of imposter syndrome, of whatever. And I would shove them in my backpack. And I'd bring the backpack home every night. It was getting heavy, but it almost felt normal. And, I would binge on some junk food. I would have an extra glass of wine. I'd lose my temper. I would do all those things because I really didn't know how to process my stress. And I just didn't have that emotional awareness. And then, here I am after 4 or 5 days in ICU, I come out of it and I start to learn about my accident. The driver had a revoked license and it shouldn't have happened, right? That's one perspective, but it did. And now we got to recover. And it was like, whoa, like here we are as a young family. Our world got tipped upside down. It not only changed me, but it changed everyone. There's a ripple effect to it all.
Right. Yeah. So that, and so it's not like it was expected. It's not like you could prepare for something like that. Obviously everybody had to kind of drop everything, and it's now all of a sudden the first part of your life. Cause you were, so that the accident was head on too. You were going one way, the driver was going the other way. So even though they were going 40 miles an hour, it was probably like a 50, 60 mile an hour impact to some degree. And you had complete immobility and the doctors, I believe, told you that you may not be able to walk the same anymore, do any sports that you loved anymore. So it changed your life.
Absolutely. So the doctors did say, listen, we just want to lay down expectations for you, given the injuries that you have suffered. And we've seen injuries like this. You're probably going to walk with difficulty. At first, like the left leg, like acted shorter than the right one. You're probably never going to ride again because there's in terms of extension and flexion of the left knee in particular. But again, the right knee had a pretty tremendous fracture to it as well. But relatively speaking, it was like, we don't have to worry about the right one. Your left one's a mess. But the right one just on its own was a mess, right? And they're like, you're probably going to have a lot of surgeries, probably a lot of rehab. You're going to have a hard life. And I was like, man, I did not sign up for this. Like, this is not part of the script. I thought, Adam, I was following the script. Work hard, move your way up, have 2.1 kids, get the car, get the house, do all that. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And when you're in the hospital, one, you cannot rest in a hospital because everyone's poking at you and monitoring you, and there are things beeping and all the time. So you can't really sleep, which helps with recovery. This as an athlete. And there's just a lot of time on your hands to think. And, I made that deal with whomever was listening. I have an acronym I call who fills up your mug, like a coffee mug. It stands for Mother Earth, Universe, or God. So you pick your higher power, if you will. And so they're filling up your mug. And I made this deal like, hey, mug, If I live, I'm going to do better. And when I learned about the fact that he had a revoked license and like how long my recovery was going to be, which seemed like a lifetime, that's how long it was going to be. I got really angry and really almost vengeful and worried and anxious. At the same time, that was the storm brewing inside of me. But on the outside, I still had to be optimistic, Michael. Like, we got this. Like, we're going to make this happen. And I didn't believe a single word of it. But I was like, no, we got to do this. But I was so mad, and I was scared to death, because I was like, how am I going to support my family? Like, what's going to become of us? Like, how are we going to be able to pay for this? Like, I'm really grateful that we had medical insurance through my company and supplemental through like auto and home. If we didn't, it would bankrupt us because the medical bills were so enormous. So yeah, it was terrifying in those early days.
Yeah. How did you, I mean, obviously a lot of anger, as you say, anger towards the driver, probably anger towards just the situation in general. How did you, saying that you had trouble processing emotions before that, right? How did you process those emotions during that time and ultimately turn the corner to a more of a mindset of recovery, or did you?
Well, I did a lot of crying.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest. I cried a lot in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep. I was in horrible pain, and I was on one med to solve this issue, which caused another issue. So they gave me another medicine to solve that issue, which then caused a different issue. And I'm in traction. So the body ain't doing what the body needs to do, right? My mom and dad are involved, and that takes it up to a whole new level, right? So everyone was involved, and everyone was telling me what to do, and I would cry a lot, just a lot of times in private, sometimes with just my wife around. I did have a moment where a mentor shared with me. He was like, "Listen, you're a mess right now." I'm like, "Well, thank you, Captain Obvious." He's like, "But here's the thing: everything that happens, is neutral until you decide to label it. And if you want to label yourself as a victim right now, no one's going to argue with you because you've been through something horrific that you didn't sign up for, and all that's true, Michael. But maybe this happened for you, not to you. And maybe there's some neutrality here in this. And then that neutrality, maybe you can look at this a little bit differently." And at first I was like, Adam, I was like, I don't know. Like, that sounds like Yoda, who took my mentor and turned them into Yoda? Cause I was like, I'm not ready for that. It makes for a good movie, but when you're in pain, sometimes you're just not ready to hear some things. And what he was saying was very similar to what Viktor Frankl is accredited in writing about, like, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is our freedom and our freedom for growth. And I was like, you know what? The more I thought about it, because I had a lot of time in the hospital to think about it, I was like, you know what? That's true. Things happen and they are neutral. We're just really quick with our labels: right, wrong, good, bad. That's a proper perspective. That's an improper perspective. And I was like, all right, well, what's another way of looking at this? And at that point in time, that shift in perspective, and then also finding the practice of gratitude of like, okay, I can focus all day long on all the things I don't have anymore. Or I can focus in on the things I still have and I can still do. Like, I still have my girls in my life. My wife is in my life. And then from there, I was like, well, you know what? Now I'm going to label that day as my last bad day. And a lot of folks at first were like, well, and even current day, when they first hear it, they're like, well, is that sort of toxic positivity? And I'm like, no. I'm like, let me explain. So there is a Buddhist parable about first arrow, second arrow. A warrior goes into the woods. he or she gets struck by an arrow. It causes great pain, as you would imagine. And I'll make the story shorter. He starts to ruminate about the arrow. Who shot it at him? Why'd this happen to me? Am I going to live? Yada, yada, yada. And that rumination is the second arrow, which causes more pain. So I was like, well, my first arrow moment was the accident. And all my worry and anger and all that stuff that's natural that I needed to feel, because we all need to feel that. But they, after a while, became second arrows and third arrows and fourth arrows and they were making my pain worse. So I made a commitment that it's going to be called my last bad day, because if I can go to bed every night and my wife and daughters and other people who I love and who love me back are in my life, I can't chalk up the whole day as a bad day. You know, we're all going to go through bad moments. We're all going to have first arrow moments. Those first arrows usually come from sources outside of us, but we get to decide how we want to feel what we're going to feel and whether or not we want to shoot a second arrow at ourselves and make the pain worse. And so I'm going to experience a whole bunch of bad moments, which I have since that accident. But I just made a real strong commitment. I'm not going to put any more second arrows in the quiver. And if I can go to bed each night and I have people who I love, who love me back, then the day is pretty long and complex. It's all of that. And to honor them, I don't want to call the day a bad day, because I love them and they love me.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. And I mean, it almost kind of goes on along the lines of that extra time kind of thing. And I love the idea of your last bad day, because it could have been your last day completely. So
Could have
now
been
it's
my
just
last day.
borrowed time. Everything's,
Yeah.
everything's just extra
gravy.
time.
Yeah.
Bonus time.
It's like, I do feel like I got bonus time, you know, it's all gravy and whipped cream and a cherry and extra time, or whatever analogy you want to use. And so let's make it happen. I still have my moments like you do, Adam. Like,
Of
I
course.
still struggle with things, but we're not going to make them worse by adding a log to that fire.
Yeah. I think, we do have those moments, and I know we all have our share of those moments, those bad things it is. So sometimes they're really, really bad. And as you said, there's this legitimate validity. There's this validity to feeling the feelings that happen after that. How do you kind of gauge that time? I always that's always a big challenge, to know how long to give yourself to grieve or feel the feelings before, realizing that maybe you're shooting yourself with that second arrow. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because people have come to me and said, well, if you lose a loved one, is that just a moment? And what I share with them is like, well, let's not take this too literally, right? So it's a little bit more of a concept. So when we say we lose someone, like I lost my mom during the pandemic, and I had, a period of grieving, which would be normal, that lasted more than a moment. It lasted more than a day. And but at the same time I was grieving her loss, I also felt other emotions like gratitude and joy and happiness, and thinking about how she's influenced me and how like her mannerisms and her DNA is in who I am. Like, so in that moment of grieving, I felt a lot of other more, like, call them pleasant emotions. I was feeling all of it. And I think part of this journey of awareness is like understanding like what we're feeling and having emotional um, versatility or emotional acumen or range, if you will, that we can feel a lot of different things, not just like four emotions. Like, we get to feel all of that. So through a mindfulness practice, you can expand your emotional range. And then with that awareness too, you can be with yourself. You can listen to what the body's saying, be present with what the mind's doing. And then from there, you can make a determination of like, is this going on too long, whatever too long is for the person. And one could argue that we never get done grieving someone who's close to us. And if that's someone's perspective, I think there's a lot of validity to that. And so we want to check in with ourselves to say, okay, am I staying mad too long, or how much longer do I want to be angry about this thing? And so each case is a little bit different, and it's different for each person, but it's having that, like, being or living wide awake so we can pay attention to what we're experiencing. So it's not just some unconscious thing that we're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So we can feel, so both can be true. We can feel the feelings, we can feel the grief, and we can also not be victims to it. That's
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the great thing about humans, is that we can hold multiple thoughts all at the same time. It's not binary. Like, so yeah, I've lost loved ones since my accident, and I've grieved hard. Like, a lot of tears, a lot of different emotions, a lot of different feelings for all the different people and different relationships with all those people. And I also felt a whole bunch of gratitude and love that I got to experience part of my life with them. And so I experienced all of it. And I didn't want to just like lock onto the, we'll say, the unpleasant emotion, the anger or the worry or anxiety. It's all part of it. And again, using that neutrality, you can even have some neutrality with the emotion of worry. We don't have to label it as bad. It's just worry. And then what we do with it, that is up to us to determine how to best move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you? So I obviously know kind of the rest of your story, and I'll fast forward a little bit before coming back to this moment. But I want to know, how are you feeling physically now? 20 plus years later, do you still have some, if you don't mind me asking, physical limitations, or are you fully recovered?
Yeah, no, a lot of people would ask me, like, right after the accident, hey, are you back to normal? And I'm like, like, normal left the building with Elvis on that morning. Like, that normal ain't
Right.
coming back. It's sort of like the pandemic. Like, I can't wait to get back to normal. I'm like, really? Like, I don't know if normal was working out for everyone. Just saying.
Right.
I don't know. Just me. I want better than normal if I have a choice. So, like, that moment of impact that was ever so brief, less than a second, has given me like a chronic health issue. So if you just looked at me and you looked at my Strava, you'd be like, okay, this guy knows how to ride. Like, I'm going to do Unbound XL at the end of May, right? It's a 350-mile gravel race. So through that lens, you'd be like, yeah, this guy's better than normal. And in some ways I am. But in other ways, like, I haven't been able to run since the accident. I have neuropathic pain through my left leg. I have a big toe drop in my left foot. If I have a cut or a wound on my left foot, it takes forever for it to heal because of the blood flow there. That opens me up to cases of cellulitis, which is a skin infection, and that sucker can spread quickly, and it's super painful. And I've had it multiple times. So I have a total knee replacement, right, at a pretty young age. So I like to think I'm setting new benchmarks around what you can do on a total knee replacement. So I have like things that I'm dealing with. Like, so getting a total knee replacement, as an example, going back to that one, at my age, then what we don't know, is that going to last your lifetime? Or are you going to have to go back in and get it redone when I'm 80? And then every time you go back into that knee, there's a chance for infection. There's also the bypass graft there that we have to worry about. So, like, nothing is like straightforward. Even my total knee replacement was a custom job.
Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day to day. We get distracted. We face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey.
An off the shelf knee. It was,
right.
They had to go. And so there are definitely things that I think about. I don't want to call it worry, but they're part of who I am. I loved running. I did the Boston Marathon. My youngest was a runner. We've never been able to run together. Like that, that hurt for a long time. And, we've come to accept that. But yeah, so I still deal with things, but in the same breath, I rode across the country, I rode across New York State, and I'm going to have a beautiful ride in the Flint Hills of Kansas, and ride 350 miles on gravel for about 30 hours. And so not too many people get to say they've done something like that.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is on my bucket list, by the way, the ride across the United States. That's something that I want to do.
So good.
So badly.
Adam, totally do it. It is so good. My wife drove our RV. We had 2 of our 3 dogs with us. It was such a great experience. We met so many wonderful people. And I know you have listeners all over, so this is a bit of a U.S.-centric opinion right now. We have such a beautiful country. It's so beautiful. It's so massive, and it's worth fighting for, and the people are worth fighting for. I think we can find a way to come together, and we see the world differently because we live in different places and we have different ways of growing up. But I think most of us want to have a good life and want others to have a good life, and we care. And I think we have so much in common, and we're forgetting that in current times. That's dividing us. But yeah, I would say definitely do it. I rode some beautiful rails to trails like the Katy Trail in Missouri, the Gap Trail, and the C&O from Pittsburgh to DC. So great. I loved it.
That's such a cool perspective. And I love how you frame that too, with regard to, how we can, what I interpreted there at least was that we can be more connected too when you can see the rest of the world and see other parts of it or see other parts of the country, and that there's this kind of emergence of a divisiveness that's been happening over time. And I've seen it too. And one of the beautiful things I think that you said on your recent interview with Rich Roll, which I loved, by the way, which was that, just engaging in these tiny ripples to override the algorithm of our divisiveness. And I love that attitude because we are driven, feels like, by these algorithms and social media and all that are dividing us. But this connection can bring us closer together.
Absolutely. I was riding through Rushville, Indiana, and went to the Moose Cafe in Antiques for a morning latte and a muffin. And in 2022, Rushville was celebrating their 250th anniversary as a town. And so I walked in, and at the front table, there were 12 elders, all doing a coffee clutch, talking about the problems of Rushville or whatever, or like what was on The Bachelor, or their favorite Taylor Swift song. I don't know what they're talking about. But I walk in my cycling kit, and, there's already some dust on me, and it's only 10 a.m. And I ordered my latte, I get my muffin, and one of them said, hey, biker guy. And I like, come over here. We got some questions for you. And where they were in Rushville, Indiana, like politically, is probably a really red part of the country. I live outside of New York and New Jersey, which is a very blue part of the country. And if we just like look at these folks and they look at me from afar, oh, you're from there, right? Oh, you must be like this. Then we don't connect. But they started talking about like the ride. And, I asked them about Rushville, and we had this like really awesome conversation. And then the whole coffee shop is like eavesdropping in to the conversation. And it was really cool. And I got to share like what I saw in the country and where I'm going. And I got to learn a little bit about them. And when I left, the cafe, they all said like, God bless you. I was like more like, and I'm not a particularly like religious, institutional religious person, but it was their way to say like safe travels, like be safe. Like I see you. I was like, we just need more of those conversations. We need to slow down a little bit to say, hey, biker guy, we got some questions for you. And we start to have a conversation as opposed to right off the rip, judging someone. Again, going back to the stimulus is we see someone or we read about someone and we create a label. The key to all this is like, there's a space between what you read, what you see, what you hear on the news, and how you interpret it. There's a space there. And if you can make that space a little bit longer, you might see something else. And that something else can be the key to bringing us together.
Yeah. Yeah. In sobriety, we have this terminology, called look for the similarities, not the differences. Because it's so easy to go into a room and see where you're different. But when you actually focus on the similarities, that's where healing happens.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
the glue.
I love that aspect.
That's the glue of the kintsugi. Like pottery breaks, but it can be put back together. And we show our scar lines. We celebrate our scar lines. So we've been through a lot as a country, as a planet. We have scars. I have scars. They're symbols of our strength. They're symbols that we have gone through something and we've come together. I firmly believe in this. And I believe it even more after riding across the country.
Yeah. And kintsugi, that's such a great word for it. And and that's also the name of your podcast, which is, and so can you, so if after you listen to this, go listen to that podcast because it's great. And such a great concept of the kintsugi. So getting back onto the bike, that must have been a real challenge. Cause I've been in a bike accident with a car before, and it's scary. I mean, I could only imagine what it is like to be in a head-on collision and have to be hospitalized for so long. But it's really hard to get on the bike after something that frightening happens to you. How was that process? How did you get back on the bike?
Well, I got pushed back on the bike. I actually wasn't that terrified of cars, although I've had some moments where the lighting or the vehicle is such and it's coming at me, and I've had a handful of moments where I've had some flashbacks, to be transparent. But I wasn't really in that moment, wasn't scared about traffic, because I was like, this accident is so random, but not so random, maybe, depending on your perspective, that lightning's not going to strike twice. Like, I'm going to be fine. What I was really nervous about was like getting on the bike and realizing how far I had to go to get back to normal. And it's sort of like, I've shared this before. It's sort of like when you're on a diet, you're trying to lose a few lbs, and you have your favorite pair of jeans that you've been wearing for about 2 weeks now that you haven't washed because they're not that dirty, but they start to get looser and looser. And as you put your jeans on, you're like, God, these are really loose. I must be losing some weight. And you don't want to get on the scale because the scale ain't going to lie to you. So you're like, oh, the genes are telling me that I've lost some weight, but they're only looser. You really haven't lost weight. So I was really quite nervous about getting back on the bike and seeing that, yeah, I have made progress, but boy, I have so much more to go. And then my physical therapist basically pressed my button, said I couldn't come back to rehab physical therapy until I tried. And I fought her and had a little bit of an argument. And then the next day I got on the bike and did some laps around the industrial park where we'd have Thursday night crits. And then I got on the road that day and a big truck passed me. And I was like, all right, we can do this. And at that point, then it was like, all right, we're just going to go a little bit further. We're going to go a little bit faster each day. Like work hard today to make tomorrow better, creating better tomorrows. And that's what we did. So, and it took another like 6 years, 7 years before I pinned a number back on and raced again. And I was just slowly but surely, pedal stroke by pedal stroke, breath by breath, step by step, regaining my strength and regaining my flexibility and a whole bunch of bike fits to make it work and multiple surgeries, but we were doing it.
I love that. Just gradual progress to get to where you wanted to go. And eventually that took you to riding across the America, getting back to racing. And yeah, it's just such a powerful story. And in that process, I understand that, that you really built a life around mindfulness, and, from where you came from before the accident to where you are now, and building this mindfulness practice, incorporating it into your life and incorporating it even into your success in your business. Can you share on that and how pause, breathe, reflect kind of came into being?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Adam. So one of the things I learned when I was younger in sports is like when the game got really fast, coach would call it timeout. Be like, hey, timeout, towel off, hydrate, catch your breath. All right, here's what we're going to do next. Here's the play. Or if you couldn't call a timeout, if you're on the pitcher's mound, coach would say, hey, step off the rubber, take a deep breath, right? And I was like, all right, I got to come back. I got to find my breath because the extent of my recovery was overwhelming. Like, painting the picture, everyone had a point of view as far as what I should do. And it seemed daunting. I was like, how am I going to do this? Everything felt so fast. So I had to call a timeout so that when I had this aha, the next day I rolled myself to a quiet place in the hospital and I did my very first pause, breathe, reflect moment. It was a box breathing pattern just to connect with my breath, slow things down. And the reflection piece is important because that's the time where we're going to write up the next play, call the next move. So there's a lot of like in the mindfulness space, which has really gotten popular over the last few years. I think there's a notion that it's like, oh, it's all going to zen you out. It's all chill. It's all about stress management and anxiety. And it has a role to play, no doubt about that. And so there's a lot of different, thoughts out there as far as like your breath and stopping and pausing. For me, and this is the big thing with our community, is like the reflect piece is almost the vital piece. So we can sit and we can meditate, but if you don't bring your practice off the cushion or in yoga off the mat and weave it into your day, then what are we doing? It's just a transactional thing you do as part of your morning routine. These practices are designed to be transformational for you to live differently. And so there are times when I feel stressed and I feel anxious that a meditation can really work. And you sit and you do a practice. But meditation and mindfulness can also expand your awareness so you can see more perspectives, so you can choose better labels, or it can help you focus or help you reach a moment with some level of equanimity, which is sort of like how a surfer has to be riding a wave, like all these micro changes in their balance to ride the wave with grace. So it can be a lot of different things, and the breath can amp you up too. So But what we're trying to do with pause, breathe, reflect is create that space between what's happening in your life and now what do you want to do? So just breathing and then, okay, we're done with that. Cross it off my list, morning routine, onto my email. That's not weaving it in or embodying the practice. So that's what I started doing in my recovery. And I was like, privately, it was working. So I brought it into my corporate life and it helped me get to the corporate executive suite. Although I didn't tell anyone because back then mindfulness was like, oh, that's a soft thing. Like, and it's so funny how the soft skills are the hardest ones to do, right? But we don't want to talk about the soft skills, even though they're really super hard because we're like, oh, that's soft. Are you, because the feeling is, are you zenning out? You're losing your edge. Where's your ambition? And I'm like, I'm like, I beg your pardon. Like, what it does is it helps you bring awareness to like where you are right now and being really intentional and focused about where you're going, as opposed to being reactionary. You can, as cliche as it sounds, you can be responsive. It actually makes it easier to get into flow, although you can't really get into flow. Flow happens, as you know. But it's actually a skill, a tool to help level up your game. So with all the other executives around me, the game was going way too fast and they were reacting. And I would just tap into my PBR practice to slow the game down so I could be a little bit more thoughtful. And it works wonders in sport too, like the power of visualization. So when I was riding across America, in my training, I would visualize, like when it was a windy day here, I would visualize I was in Wyoming and fighting the winds of Wyoming. Because one person asked me, like, what makes you think you can do this? You've never done anything like this before. And I'm like, in my mind, I've done it 100, 200 times. Like, I got this. And so visualizing isn't a guarantee that we're going to have success, but it puts us in like the moment. And I'm visualizing Unbound XL right now as I train. Like, okay, how am I feeling? Where's my mind at? Like, what are my tools I can use to shift my mindset if I'm going through a particularly tough moment? So mindfulness can be so much more than I think it's currently seen as, So yeah, it can help us zen out. That's really cool, but it can offer up so much more so we can live a life wide awake and live thoughtfully. And when we're thoughtful, then we can offer each other the notion that, hey, I hear you, I see you, and I love you, one human to another, even if we happen to look at the world differently.
Yeah. And it's so interesting you're in talking about the executive mindset. And yeah, we do see mindfulness. I mean, it is more prevalent out there, and especially with entrepreneurs, more executives and things like that. But it's still, you still get that sense of, from these pockets of leaders in the world, that it is still this soft thing, that it's not, that you're being kind of frou or zen, as you say it. But I've talked to so many executives like yourself, leaders like yourself, entrepreneurs that practice these mindfulness techniques, and they work, especially the visualization side.
Yeah.
And you visualize
so
where you
helpful.
want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think I'm going to be a little critical of business right now on this. And I think it's deserving, although people might disagree. And if you disagree with me, you can always write me. When we went through the pandemic, the pandemic helped us see that mental health is health, which was a good thing. We started talking about mental health more openly, which I think is fantastic, because we still don't talk about it enough. We'll talk about, an ACL tear all day long with our colleagues, but we're still not comfortable talking about, a depression we might feel or anxiety we might feel, but we're getting better at it. And through the pandemic, a lot of companies said, oh, we're going to give you this app because it's for your mental health and it's for you to zen out. And they didn't teach people how to do mindfulness. There was no teaching They were like, oh yeah, we make the app accessible. And here's my feeling. It's like, we know in sport, and we also know in business and performing arts, like Taylor Swift, mindset is as important as skill set. And so in business, our mindset, our thinking, our brain power matters even more than on the pitch or the field or the court. And we don't do anything really about training that and developing that in people. And we can't do it with like, oh yeah, we just gave you an app through our benefits program. That's not cutting it. And you're niching mindfulness as, well, just use that if you need to zen out. It's a total disservice to the people going through what they're going through, but also just what we can tap into as employees and say, what would be possible if we really developed our mindset where we had greater awareness and we had sharper focus and we could meet stressful moments with more calm. And yeah, we're going to offer an app, but we're also going to offer guidance and coaching around that. Because we're not running a 100-yard dash. We're not riding our bikes. We're not shooting a free throw. We're making business decisions with our mind and our bodies connected to all that. So I really think we can do a lot more when it comes to business around strengthening our mindset.
Yeah. And so you have an app for that as well.
I do have an app. Yeah, I criticize the people giving an app away. At the same time, I'm about to share a little bit about my app.
But I think that's important though, because I think I in looking at, and I've just downloaded the app, and it's really great because it does have a lot of those lessons on there. And I feel like what you're criticizing there about the corporate world, you're trying to solve through this app. So can you kind of talk a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah. So with Pause, Breathe, Reflect, what we've done is we've made the practices shorter, because there's great research coming out now that shorter practices are valuable. Where I did my formal teaching training is with mindfulness-based stress reduction. And that's a 45-minute a day practice. Not too many people have 45 minutes a day. And a lot of the people that have busy careers don't. There's a lot going on in life. And they don't even have 10 minutes in the morning. They're like, yeah, I want to do this mindfulness thing, but I can't do it consistently because I don't have 10 minutes every morning. I'm like, fine. But I bet you have 5 times throughout the day where you have 2 minutes. And so just drop in for 2 minutes, connect with your breath, connect with your body, think about what you want to do next, be thoughtful about that. 2 minutes throughout the day, and you have 10 minutes. And the other thing I try to do is not just give the app, but provide coaching to folks around it. So people who have the app have access to me. There's a lot of people I get to connect with now, which is really cool. And to help people strengthen their practice, and offer guidance on, how to do a box breathing pattern when you feel like you can't hold your breath for a count of 4. Because people email me that question all the time. I'm like, start where you're at. Like if you can hold your breath for 2, start there and you can expand to 4. So what I'm trying to do is say mindfulness can be done with short practices and wrap around guidance to support people. So it becomes a way of living. And when it becomes a way of living, then a whole bunch of positive things happen. That's a beautiful ripple. It changes our relationships at home. It changes our work cultures. I don't think we can have diversity, equity, and inclusion without mindfulness.
Oh man, that's 100% so good. Yeah, because I think that obviously includes the mental health aspect and we need more of that. And I think this is a great app for those purposes, not just because it provides the tools and resources and education around mindfulness, but also the community. I mean, you're offering yourself as coaching, and I think the community is such a vital part to that.
Yeah, and we do live practices throughout the week so people can practice together. And so, we're thirsty for belonging. And, so if someone's like really into like hardcore meditation and doing like a 5-day silent retreat, it may not be the app for them. And meditation and mindfulness isn't for everyone. It is for more people than who currently do it, but it's not for everyone, just like any tool isn't for everyone. But I'm trying to reach people who are like curious about meditation, they're new to it, and they want some guidance. And, and guidance from someone who has spent some time in corporate life, who, sort of knows those ins and outs and really help people along. It's been a key to my recovery. It's been a key to my career, really a key to my life. And, I feel compelled now to share it with others, not in a heavy-handed way, but just, I got your back, like the hand on your back, and we're going to figure out how to do hard things together. Because when we work together, like any good cycling peloton, we can go faster and farther.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you are interested in an app like this, download the Pause, Breathe, Reflect app. You can do that on Apple and I imagine the all platforms.
All platforms, right? Yeah. Google Play, Apple App Store, and people can pay whatever they want to pay for the first year.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, it's a really great app, and especially if it's something that you are interested in. And we didn't touch on this a whole lot too, but Michael's career as an executive, brought him to a very high level in the C-suite. Running thousands of people plus $4 billion business. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And so you're coaching people on that as well, on executive coaching as well, right?
Yeah, companies hire me and people work with me around executive leadership and leadership coaching. And then sometimes through the back door, we talk about the mindfulness stuff. We talk about hard skills and we talk about soft skills. And because I do believe, like, if we can learn how to work better together, then we can learn how to live better together, because we spend so much time at work in this country. So I think work can be a really great doorway to walk through to say, hey, let's figure out how we can do this. Like, we have people with different perspectives in our work environments all the time. We can see and hear and appreciate each other. And my hope is that is a ripple effect that spreads into our communities and across our country. There'll always be tension and stress and disagreements. That's part of it. But we don't have to be so hateful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you can disagree without being disagreeable, as cliche as that sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be mean-spirited.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that idea, though, of leadership and mindfulness is the chocolate and peanut butter that we need to make this delicious sandwich of peace and harmony that we can have. Sorry for that terrible analogy, but
that's okay. Hey, who doesn't, if chocolate and peanut butter, I'm down for that. Yeah, we can throw in a s'more too. Like, who doesn't like a good s'more?
Yeah. So. It's the s'more that makes the world go round. So
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Well, Michael, where can people find you? Obviously, download the Pause, Breathe, Reflect app, and where else can people find you? Where would you like them to reach out?
So you can find me on my website, which is michaelobrienshift.com. There, they can sign up for my weekly newsletter, which is the Ripple Effect. And then normally, social media-wise, I hang out on LinkedIn and Instagram, and that's pretty much it. So, but the good place to start is with the app, and then get the newsletter. And when they reach out, it's me. It's not some robot. So they get me. They get a real human. And I just love connecting with people and being able to support wherever they happen to be in their journey. I think that's a really powerful ripple, and I'm really grateful that I get to do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, and to everybody else out there. I think that's just a small investment of time and money to make a powerful impact. And that's really what we need in this world. So, Michael, thank you for the message that you're delivering. It's truly, I mean, it's so powerful and so needed right now in this world that we're living in, where we're divided, where we're feeling hurt, not just physically, but mentally, and we need to heal. So thank you for helping us heal.
You're welcome, Adam. Thanks for having me on. I just love what you're doing and the vibe that you're putting out into the world. And the ripple effect that you're creating. The world needs like more atoms. So keep pedaling, brother.
Thank you, sir. You too. And thank you, Michael, for being here. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you next time. We will see you soon. Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular, and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.